Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology, From the Ground Down. Presented by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of the Bible from leading experts in the field of archaeology.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. David Graves, an experienced biblical archaeologist and CEO of Electronic Christian Media. I'm here today with another exciting episode on our Archaeology Discoveries channel, where we discuss important archaeological artifacts related to the Bible. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel.
Well, welcome to today's podcast. This is Bible Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Today, my special guest is Dr. David Graves. We're continuing in the Persian period. Last time it was Darius, and today it is Xerxes the First, in correspondence with the Book of Esther. And Dr. Graves received his PhD from Aberdeen University in Scotland. He has experience in over 35 years in archaeology in the Middle East, as well as teaching in the field of archaeology. I know that he's been teaching long hours in classrooms. Lately, it was Trinity Southwest University in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is about 10 miles from where I'm podcasting at this very moment. He has one of his PowerPoints ready to go. And did I mention he also was my square supervisor in Tel El Hammam in Jordan, along with other excavators. You're in the team with also, it was Dr. Scott Stripling now, and lead excavator at Shiloh, and also Dean Gary Byers at Trinity Southwest University. Now, Dean's not his first name. That's his position at the university. I'm going to give everybody a heads up because on the 15th, we're going to be recording a podcast, and they're going to call it, what, the Three Amigos? Because they all three excavated together, Dr. Graves, Dean Byers, and Dr. Stripling, at a number of locations. I believe you were all at Tel El Hammam together. Also is MacArthur, the candidate for Biblical Eye, and of course at Shiloh. And we just did a podcast about a month ago when Dean Byers was, I guess he had the day off. And we did a podcast from his hotel. And then when he came back, he talked about some of the items because they weren't published yet. So it was a general report on the excavation. But on the 15th, they're going to get together and they're going to talk about each one of the sites that they excavated together, but also their individual experience. Dr. Graves is going to be the lost city of Livius, and Dean Byers, the lost city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And there's nothing lost about Shiloh. I think everybody agrees that Shiloh is Shiloh, like Jerusalem is Jerusalem, and Megiddo is Megiddo. But I believe Dr. Stripling is going to be discussing the location of the tabernacle, I believe. I think that's what it's going to be. Yeah, so this is going to be very, very interesting. And they're doing it in I could say in honor of reaching our 100,000 subscriber to the program. And Dr. Graves put this together for us. So in appreciation, I want to give everybody a heads up on that. So if your PowerPoint is ready, Doctor, I believe all of us are in anticipation and ready to go.
Okay, well, we'll get started here and dive into Xerxes and Esther. We're going to talk about the Book of Esther a little bit because it correlates with the life and accomplishments of Xerxes. The material that I'm going to talk about today is found in my book on the biblical, or the archaeology of biblical people, blue volume on that. So here we have the jar of Xerxes. We know that he is an actual historical individual mentioned in the Book of Esther. And there's a couple of jars. These are alabaster jars that have some I say Akkadian cuneiform there, but there's actually Egyptian hieroglyphics on there as well. So we have Egyptian hieroglyphics and the Akkadian, and it was found in the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, and that's actually modern day Bodrum in Turkey. There's Bodrum right there, and this one's in the British Museum. It was discovered in 1862. Actually, this spot in Bodrum is it has a beautiful medieval castle, and inside the castle, they've turned it into one of the only underwater archaeological museums. I had a chance to visit it in my travels to Turkey one year, and really highly recommend it. It's quite an amazing underwater. They have a lot of reconstruction of ships and how the vessels are found inside the vessels are found inside the vessels. So inside the ship, how they were stored, the amphoras, and a lot of stuff that is associated with underwater archaeology. And the setting is quite breathtaking, being in a medieval castle. So that's a little bit of an aside, but that's where these particular jars were discovered. Of course, the Persian period deals with the country of Iran. We're going to talk about Susa and Persepolis a little bit. So here are 4 of them. They're in different museums. From right to left, one's in the museum in Paris, 2 in the British Museum, and then there's one in the Met Museum in the US, another one in the Louvre, and then there's another one in the museum in Vienna. So here are actually, well, there's a drawing in the middle there. A B is a drawing of C, but you can see the Egyptian hieroglyphics on the side of it. You might ask, why is there Egyptian hieroglyphics on a vessel from a Persian king? And that's because he was the king over Egypt at that time period as well. And so his name is found on these alabaster jars. As I mentioned, my book on the archaeology of biblical people has all the footnotes for the material there for anybody that wants to dig a little deeper. 101 different discoveries. We're only going to talk about a couple. And also, the material can be found in my other book called The Cultural Background of the Old Testament. This material is on the Book of Esther, and a bunch of other books I've written as well in the Cultural Background series. Some on the 7 churches, and then some on the New Testament cities and discoveries. Now, to put things in perspective, Xerxes lived during the time of Esther, and this is the period right here from about 486 to 465 BC. And he's also called Ahasuerus. So sometimes you'll hear Ahasuerus, sometimes you'll hear Xerxes. So not to be confused, goes by 2 different names. He was assassinated by his brother in 465 BC, and then the Persian Empire fell in 331 BC. So way over here is when the Persian Empire fell. But then last week we talked about Xerxes. Well, we talked about Cyrus, and then Xerxes. Right here, the son of Darius I. And then we'll talk next week about Artaxerxes and Nehemiah and how it relates to Jerusalem. So here is the genealogy. Cyrus I, Cyrus II, and then on the other side is Darius I and his son Xerxes I. And they reigned not consecutively, but after each other. As I mentioned, he was the pharaoh of Egypt in the 27th dynasty from 486 to 465 BC, at the same time being the king of the Persians. So he had conquered a large empire. He was also known for having attacked the Greeks. and then came back and did a lot of had a lot of buildings reconstructed and built in his name, succeeded by Artaxerxes I. So I had already mentioned these jars. There's the different jars. Building projects, the Apenina Palace in Persepolis, Iran. Some of the reliefs here, carvings of the soldiers, what they would have looked like in the Persian period, that were on the outside of the buildings. He's also famous for the Gate of All Nations. This is the Gate of All Nations right here, the two Lamassu, the winged bulls that stand on either side of the entrance. Some of the other carved pillars. Here's the soldiers on the front of the ruins of the Ara Palace in Persepolis. He built that as well. There's a side view of it. Quite an impressive area. I've never been to Iran to see them. It was one of my plans, but I don't think it's really a good place to go recently with the present wars and things that are happening. But thankfully, we have some good photographs to preserve it. Here's some more of the soldiers, Persian soldiers with their quivers and spears. And a picture here of King Xerxes I, a relief of him sitting in his chair, looking very distinguished. As I mentioned, this parallels the dating of the writing of Esther. And because the author is unknown, it is difficult to say with certainty when the book was actually written exactly. Esther 10:2 states that the book was written after the death of Ahasuerus or Xerxes. And he was assassinated in 465, as I mentioned, BC. And the Persian Empire fell in 331 BC. So the dating for writing Esther should fall sometime between the death of Xerxes I and the fall of the Persian Empire, because that's when the story takes place. Although the Book of Esther doesn't appear in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have every book of the Old Testament appearing in the Dead Sea Scrolls, except for the Book of Esther. Now, having said that, some argued a small Dead Sea Scroll fragment, it's actually called the 4Q Proto-Esther, is quoted, the Book of Esther is quoted in that particular fragment that links it to Esther. The other interesting fact about the Book of Esther is that, and Josephus mentions that Esther was written during the rule of Artaxerxes, so a little bit later. But although some Jewish scholars continued to reject the book as late as the 3rd or the 4th century AD, it was still included in the Old Testament. An interesting fact about the Book of Esther is that it doesn't mention the name of God or Yahweh in the book at all. That's why some suggest that is why it wasn't received. And that's possibly why it wasn't included among the Dead Sea Scrolls, because of missing the name of God. So the Book of Esther was accepted into the Old Testament canon by the end of the Old Testament period of 400 BC. And it was also confirmed in the Council of Jamnia in AD 90. So it has been accepted as part of the Old Testament canon, even though there's been a few questions about its authorship and so on. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the feast that's mentioned in the Book of Esther. And so the scroll of the Book of Esther is kind of interesting story behind it as well. It's treated a bit different by the Jewish community. So traditionally, a scroll of Esther is given only one roller fixed to the left-hand side of the scroll, rather than having two rollers, one on each side, as was used in the Torah scrolls. Here you have a copy of Esther being rolled out. You see the roller on the left side, but none on the right side. This is from the 13th to 14th century. So I thought that was kind of an interesting fact. So again, it's treated a little bit different by Jewish people. The cultural background, the events, as I mentioned, of the Book of Esther occurred during the reign of Xerxes in Persia. And Queen Vashti, her refusal to appear at a feast led to her dismissal, prompting King Xerxes to hold a beauty contest that resulted in the selection of a Jewish girl called Hadassah, later called Esther, as his queen. So Esther was positioned by divine providence to protect her people from. So that's her claim to fame. Esther originally was a captive from Jerusalem, was raised by her cousin Mordecai in Susa, where he held a significant office in the king's court, according to Esther 1 and Esther 2. When Mordecai refused to bow to the high-ranking official Haman plotted to annihilate the Jews, casting lots to determine the date. And this act underscores Israel's commitment to their faith and their identity. So basically, Mordecai urged Esther to intercede with the king, reminding her that her royal position might be divine placement for this very moment. So here we have who rose to power under the providence of God for a significant purpose. Folks might see some parallels in our current political situation, but I won't say more on that. But God sometimes raises individuals for such a time as this. So Esther agreed, fasting for 3 days in preparation. She invited Haman and the king to a banquet to reveal her Jewish identity and Haman's plot. When the king discovered Mordecai's unrecognized act of loyalty, he sought to honor him, mistakenly believing Haman was to be honored. And ultimately, Esther revealed Haman's treachery, leading to Haman's execution and Mordecai's promotion. And although the original decree against the Jews stood, a new edict was allowed them to defend themselves, resulting in their victory over their enemies on the 13th of Adar. And this day is commemorated in the Jewish festival of Purim, celebrating their deliverance. It's a theme that's echoed in the New Testament through the Lord's Supper, actually, as a celebration of salvation through Christ. So it's kind of interesting how we have a New Testament parallel, the idea of a feast or the Lord's Supper, commemorating deliverance, our deliverance from sin, and in Purim's case, the deliverance from the Persians. The book of Esther concludes with then the acknowledgement of Xerxes and Mordecai's accomplishments in chapter 10. And that's how we tie it into the Persian Empire and why it's so significant to our understanding of this time period in history. So that's a quick overview of Xerxes I and the book of Esther and its relevance. So hopefully that'll give everybody a bit of a background, cultural background, as they read the book of Esther and for what's going on there. Now, George, I think you've got a few artifacts, maybe?
Yeah, because we talked about cuneiform, which means wedge form.
Yep.
And then you talked about hieroglyph. Hieroglyph actually means sacred carving. I think the word hieroglyph is actually Greek. Many people
Yes.
think it's an Egyptian word, but it's Greek. It's kind of like the word eushopti. Eushopti is a Greek word referring to a statue. I'm off the subject, but just I think it's fascinating. Um, so let's take a look. You talked about, first of all, this what cuneiform. Now this is a copy, of course. Can people see that? Let me see if I can. Hopefully, it's the right direction. You're getting a reverse of what I'm holding up. So
Yeah, that's a teacher's tablet.
yes, exactly. So this, let's say that some young boys were going to a scribal class, and the scribe was teaching them how to write cuneiform.
Hmm.
And let's do a comparison to our culture, where if you're in the, I guess it's the first or second grade, maybe kindergarten, and you learn how to write, you get a piece of paper and the lines are very broad, very wide. They give them coordination and stay in the lines. But as you get more and more, the children get more and more accurate, the lines get smaller. So you can put more letters on a page. But you can see right here how broad they are, how wide they are. So, and it's kind of crooked. If I hold this right, it's it's very wide and kind of crooked. So maybe a scribe drew the lines and the student was to fill it in. I don't think this would be a beginner's class because it is still neat. You get
And
earlier ones that are really lopsided.
I think on that one as well, the top line is the teacher writes the letters, and then the bottom two is where the student is to copy it.
I can't do it on this one because it's a copy that I made,
Yeah.
uh, and it's only one-sided. Because you have some teaching tablets that are just one-sided, such as this, but other ones have the assignment written by the teacher on one side, and when you flip it over, that's the student. So on one side, it's really neat, but on the other side, it's crooked and kind of sloppy. That's the student.
Yeah.
All right, but anyway, that's cuneiform, wedge-shaped. And then you got the sacred carving of the Egyptians, the hieroglyph. Now, can you see this right here?
Yeah.
Is that blurry?
No, you can see it.
Okay. Anyway, that's the hieroglyph. So when we are talking about one more vessel, alabaster, this doesn't have anything on it. And alabaster is kind of like a soft stone. So it's easy to carve in. And its composition is kind of like semi-porous.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put perfume in here, an ointment, eventually it kind of soaks into the stone.
Mm-hmm.
So if you leave it plugged up, you can still smell a faint odor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you left one of these vessels, let's say, don't unplug it, just leave it in there. And as it absorbs into the semi-porous stone, if we find these in tombs, that's why it's perfect. That's why it's a tomb alabaster from a tomb. The scent would fill the tomb, at least for a while. Of course, this is 2,000 years old or more. All right. But we could say if somebody had alabaster in this vessel, very costly, as we read in the scripture. And Judas said, "Why did you do this? This is worth a lot of money." And Jesus says, "Leave her alone. She prepares me for my burial." I think that's interesting that he says that because Lazarus was raised from the dead. That means this stone was rolled away, right? Lazarus, roll away the stone. Lazarus, come out. What do you think they're going to do with everything that's precious inside that tomb? You got to take it out. It's going to be stolen. I wonder where they got this to anoint Jesus. I think it was from the tomb, just an assumption. And then Jesus turns around and says, "Leave her alone. She's preparing me for what was it used for? Burial." Isn't that interesting? Off subject, but interesting. Okay. And there's a Greek lucky toast because we're in the 5th century. And you briefly mentioned that Xerxes invaded their Greek coast, the Battle of Thermopylae. And we seen this in the Battle of the 300, right?
Movie, yes.
So you young guys that are all into the battle and everybody with the 6-packs, if you don't have a 6-pack, you don't go to battle. That's just the way it is. You got to be completely bad. I don't want to say bad, but you know what I'm talking about. So this is Greek. Fun stuff. Okay, something else. In battle, arrows And javelins cost a lot. They're made of metal. What's cheap? What's a cheap weapon? A rock. And they would cut them. This was limestone. You'd cut it to a certain size. I shouldn't say you, but they. And this is actually, it's given a terminology. You can say throwing stone, but this is a little bit big for a throwing stone. They probably put this in some kind of a sling, a catapult, and sling them. Maybe
That's
more than one, maybe. Yeah.
That's
But this is called
a 45 caliber.
upside the head. But this is called ballista, and it's where we get our word bullet from. Ballista. And you find a lot of these at the excavations that go back to the Iron Age 1, Iron Age 2 period. So definitely would be included in the time period of
I excavated
Xerxes.
many of them, recovered many of them at Tel el-Hammam when we were excavating the Iron Age, and even in the Middle Bronze, you'd find a lot of these sling stones. But you know, they're both the size of a baseball.
Yep, that's what it is.
Yeah. So, and you know, the perfect to use as a weapon, because you get hit in the side of the head with one of those things. They definitely hurt.
Well, not only that, but you can see, well, this one's probably been used because it's busted in corners. So you think if it hits, it's going to send off fragments. Yeah, so it's kind of like a grenade.
The other thing is that they were also used as pounders. Because in the ancient Near East, you know, you have multi-purpose items because of, you know, what do you have laying around if you want to pound some grain in your mortar? Well, I'm going to use my my sling stone, and then the next day, of course, you get attacked. What do you reach for? You reach for your pounder, and so that's why some of the edges on those sometimes are flaked off. But they're
makes sense to me.
So we call them pounders. Sometimes we call them sling stones, and other times sort of depends on the location of where you find them. So sometimes we find them around the kitchen area. Other times you find them at the base of the city wall. So those obviously were used in battle, and we find a lot of them in battle time periods.
Oh, absolutely. So, you find stacks of them around dig sites. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have some fairly large ones stacked up around Herodian. If you go visit the Herodian. Yeah. Okay, something else easy to identify throughout different archaeological periods. We'll just say time are the different styles of oil lamps, because everybody's got to have an oil lamp. Now, this one is actually Iron Age, not Persian period. So those that are experts in oil lamps, I don't want to be called on it. Say, give me. All of a sudden, I get a comment saying, "Hey, you don't know your oil lamps." Now, the Persian oil lamps are kind of small. They are smaller, but this is Iron Age, but basically has the same style. So some call it the crock hat. Some call it the shell shape. Now, Iron Age usually has either what we call the full base. I don't know if you can see the base. This is a full base, or smaller one, which is called a modified base. And some actually make assumptions that full bases were made in, I said, Judah, and then modified bases were made up in Israel. So northern or southern. That's an assumption. Okay. But here you go. So let's say an oil lamp from the Iron Age, but very, very similar to the Persian period. And then we got your cuneiform, which was found on the alabaster vessel, along with the hieroglyphs, which were Egyptian, because Xerxes already ruled as a pharaoh in Egypt. Those were found on the alabaster vessel. But he also laid siege to the coastline in the Battle of Thermopylae of Greece. And this is a Greek vessel from the 5th century. So we got a number of different things going on here. So we got some archaeology represented. Hey, we're spoiling these people, David. That's what we're doing. You know, they get to see actual items. Now think about how many classrooms students just get books, and you get to, well, hey, wait a second. Oh, okay, here we go. See, this will show up good for me, not necessarily for you, because you got that background going on. Mine, I don't have it. So one of your books right here,
Yes.
you said it's outdated. I had to argue the point briefly before I said, David, everything's like 2,000 years old. What the heck is outdated in archaeology? He was talking about the book, but I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, look, there's the oil lamp right there. Dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun.
Yes.
Look at that. We're right on. We're saying, look at this. We're doing a good job today. All right. He looks Persian. It could be like, that would be Hezekiah. What would it be?
I think
Sennacherib, maybe.
Sennacherib, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
Sennacherib.
but anyway, this is one of his books right here in my stack of books. I don't know who the author is, though. Is the author this guy down here? David Graves? Right there?
That's me.
That's him. Okay. You don't look like Sennacherib, though. You got the beard going on, man. You got the beard.
Yeah, mine's not
But
quite as curly. But that
you
book
got to
is
have it.
actually,
What is that? They braided. That's it. Braided.
didn't braid
You know, if
mine.
you did this today, you'd be part of the woke generation, right? So put some earrings on, braid your hair. You'll be in.
Oh yeah, cool
Nothing
dude.
new under the sun, right? Nothing new. So here you
Well,
go.
that book is actually the recent discoveries that have been discovered in the last 20 years. So that has all from the Old Testament and the New Testament in it, and it's in full color or black and white.
This was black and white. I got the cheaper version.
Yeah, you can get them.
I said virgin. I didn't say virgin, did I? Said virgin.
Version.
Yeah, there you go.
So
I look like that guy looking over the roof. You know, he's looking over the stone wall.
So
He has his hands like this. He's got his hands like this. I think that was the old. Yeah, I think it was the old symbol for Kilroy in Vietnam. He's going like this. But we're off subject again, folks. But let's go ahead and have a great time. But all kinds of really cool breakouts in this book. I do recommend them. You can see I got them. I got them for references. I told David, I said I use them for references, but I never give him credit because it makes me look smarter.
I appreciate that. And
yeah, but it does have a little thing over here. I think it says Dr. Sparks. So I got to play along, right? I got to, yes. Mm-hmm. We got to use like concur. We concur on the conflagration. Yes.
So it's good that the books have the footnotes. So anybody wants to do any further study, I bring the receipts, and I don't just make stuff up. So it's all done on the basis of academic research, but it's written in a way that is easy to read and will give everybody a good filler for the background of the cultural setting of the Old and New Testaments. So anyway, George, it's been good talking about Xerxes. Next week, we'll talk about Artaxerxes. And there's some cool stuff that we're going to talk about Rhython next week. And
all right, very cool.
People will get an idea of what those are. They're really pretty cool. Drinking cups, drink your beer out of them.
Yes, a Rhython, yes.
Yeah. So,
I don't have any to show people, though.
No. I'll show some photographs, a couple of beautiful ones. I got a gold one that's really pretty impressive. So
that would be cool.
Yeah. And
let's see if I got a gold one. No gold ones here.
No.
Darn it.
Just your King Tut there in the background.
Yeah, you like that? Well, wait a second. I got his mask over here somewhere. There you go.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. Maybe I could put that on. You know? Well, the big difference between me and Dr. Graves is Dr. Graves has his, what he calls receipts. That's his references, where I basically say, trust me, bro.
Yeah, well,
with a wink.
You've got some good pottery there behind you. I've got a small collection of odds and ends, but over the years, you've got a good
I was thinking about, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No.
I was thinking about, when it comes to pottery, we have the museum at Trinity Southwest where Dean Byers is at. Also, another friend of yours from Tel El Hammam, a church in California, the Woodland Fellowship Church.
Yeah, Carl Morgan.
And they have a museum. Yes. And they have a museum there. So I thought about doing something like the Curator's Corner and have them. I already talked to Carl Morgan. He says he does it. He's too shy about doing Zooms. So I thought, well, if you got somebody else that you trained in the museum, which he's got a congregation, so hopefully he's got somebody, of course, also trained as an assistant, as curator in the museum, that we can bring people in by Zoom and they can show their artifacts, both at Trinity and in California. And then there's another one, hopefully it'll be opening here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They got a little space going on. I think it might be around 6,000 square feet. And they got a huge selection of pottery. And if they don't have it up and ready to go, maybe they'll let us. I'm going to call it the vault, because everything is most things are actually stored in the vault. Excellent. I know that they have 2 sickle swords. Pretty incredible. Huh? I think they got 4 incense shovels, either from the first Jewish revolt or the Bar Kokhba, the second Jewish revolt, where they hide things in the caves, like at Qumran, around Qumran in the Dead Sea Scroll caves. All right. What you had experience excavating.
Yeah.
So it's plans for the future when we get out that way. But once again, I'm going to need Gary Byers, Dean Byers, for the 15th. Anyway, he's going to be busy because we got that podcast coming up. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be up early making sure that there's not going to be any Murphy's Law messing up, because this is going to be, I think it's going to, I should say, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
And
3 excavations. Yes, sir.
That day as well, we're going to record another one. And we're going to have
That's right,
Daniel
later on.
Galassini with us, who is our photographer, and he teaches photography, a really good guy. He's going to talk all about the relevance and use of photography in an archaeological dig. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And he and I did a child burial and some photographs of that. And
that's right.
Photographs of some of the human remains and all the fun discoveries. And he also took a lot of fun photos of us as diggers too. So he teaches art photography, so he's a professional, and he teaches at the community college, I think there at Albuquerque, if I'm not mistaken. But he'll introduce himself, and but he's just a really nice fellow, and will give us a different perspective on the use of photography and how we take our pictures and the value of those. You take pictures at an archaeological dig differently than you take pictures of your vacation. So I won't spoil, it won't be a spoiler alert. I won't spoil it for Daniel, but he'll explain how that's done and why we do things in a certain way. And that'll be a really interesting podcast as well. So that's going to be a busy day for us.
And I thank you for mentioning that, because I did forget about it, but I was just thinking about you and your three amigo buddies, you and the other 2.
I've called that one, George, I've called that one 3 Amazing Discoveries.
3 Amazing Discoveries? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to call it the 3 Amigos.
Yeah, well, we're the 3 amigos talking about the 3 amazing discoveries, and they really are amazing. Right. We each have sort of claim to fame in our own right, even though we work together. We found stuff by ourselves, working beside other folks, and we'll talk about those discoveries and how we've contributed to the archaeological world. So that'll be a good day.
That will be. There's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be busy that day too.
Yeah.
So you better be sure you get to bed on time, because you told me you was up like till 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
And here we are up again early this morning going at it. And, well, people don't need to know, but sometimes things don't go because of Zoom. Sometimes things get Murphy's Law going on.
Yeah, I was working in some archaeological drawings, and when I get in the zone, I forget about what time it is. So I looked up, it was 1:30 in the morning, and I said, I got to get to sleep. I got to do a podcast in the morning. So I got my coffee and we're ready to go. So,
right. All right, let's wrap this up, Doctor. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe, tell a friend about the program. Be watchful for that podcast of the 3 amigos, or the three amazing discoveries. And then later on, we're going to do that podcast on photography at archaeological digs. And it's going to be a great time. I'm looking forward to it. I got all the information already on my phone ready to go. And of course, I email people ahead of time. And then I email people again, all the information the night before. And then I wake up early and get everything going and cross my fingers and off we're at it, right? So everybody, once again, thanks for participating. Thanks for subscribing. We're not done with the year. We're just starting October, but so far it's been really, really good. And I appreciate it.
Thanks, George. Good to be with you
All
as
right,
always.
David.
God bless.
Have a great day.